Talking with Eric Williams, documentary filmmaker, who went over to Southeast Asia 3 days after the Christmas tsunami. Took his film equipment over there and said, I got to get some of this stuff to share it with everybody back home. Yeah, they may be seeing it on TV, but I can get up closer with my camera and show them a little bit more of what it's like. And one of the things he does in the movie is get down to the personal level, where you're not just seeing the structures that have fallen, but the people's lives that have been affected. And we were just talking during the break here about how some of these people who had lost family members and didn't know if they were dead or not could possibly identify anybody in these mass graves or anywhere else. And he started to tell me, and I said, stop, tell me on the air. So what was the point you were about to make?
Well, the point that I was about to make, Paul, is the fact that, really people couldn't identify family members. Why? Because a lot of them had already been buried. I mean, the people, you must understand, were so afraid of disease spreading rapidly that mass graves were dug immediately. And the bodies were tossed in there like garbage bags. I got it on film. I mean, I got the information there. I mean, so you can't identify somebody who's 10 feet under.
Did they dig the graves right on the beach or wherever they possibly could? Or
and that's a very good question, because when I arrived in Bandiachi, after a 16-hour-long drive through the jungle, you could smell the dead in the air. I mean, it was like ammonia and feces all mixed in together. And that's a powerful smell.
Yes.
And no matter how big your mask is, it didn't mask the smell. So when I arrived in Bandiachi, the airport is centered on the outskirts of the town. And lo and behold, the mass graves are right next to the airport. So the minute the journalists get off the plane, you can go right over to the mass graves and see all of the bodies that are being buried right there.
You don't think that they put them there so that the media would see them, do you?
I don't.
Maybe it's because that's where body bags were coming in from?
Well, they had a lot of land. They had a lot of land. They could have buried them anywhere, but why bury them by the airport? You see, I mean, there was a long swath of land. I mean, literally, as soon as you come out of the airport, you see the bulldozers and the backhoe tractors digging the graves, and the trucks coming in after truck after truck after truck, just tossing bodies in the graves.
Wow. Did the locals there blame the government for not warning them? Was there talk of that? Why didn't anybody tell us this was coming?
That's a very good question. And if I can address that, I like to say, just beginning, this is an astounding tragedy that occurred in the Indian Ocean. It's not just a human disaster of unbearable magnitude. It's really a matter of fact. It's consequences of years of underinvestment in the scientific and technical infrastructures needed to reduce the vulnerability of developing countries such as Bandiachi and Sri Lanka. All of these are semi-colonial countries that the G8 really controlled. We must look at debt relief for a lot of these countries. These countries are poor people making low wages and no wages. So you got to look at the organizations that are based in these countries. We have major corporations that are getting resources from these countries. Exxon and Nike both have major operations in Bandiachi, Indonesia. Exxon last year made $289 billion worldwide. Bet you most people don't know that Exxon made $50 billion alone pumping for natural resources, gas and oil from Bandiachi, Indonesia, where the majority of the life was lost.
Wow.
Exxon. And Exxon was sued because of their human rights abuse. So I'm really wanting to let people know that, hey, there was a tsunami before the tsunami. There were human rights abuses. Exxon was having people killed. That's why they have a war going on there right now with the rebels that I had to pay to get through to that country. The number one on Al-Qaeda's, on our government's terrorist list. It's the most populated Muslim nation in the world. This is where the majority of the life was lost. So you got to ask the question, why and what happened? So the NOAA knew. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Association knew the tsunami was coming. I don't know if most of your listeners know about Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a military base situated in the middle of the Indian Ocean that wasn't even touched by the tsunami. Mm-hmm. They had forewarning, just as Australia did. I had just been in Australia 3 days before the tsunami hit, and then got back on the plane and went back over there. So you got to ask a lot of questions about how and why or how did it happen.
Because we heard stories about, because it happened early on a Sunday morning, the people who were called by the early warning system that does exist out there in the middle of the Indian Ocean, these bureaucrats said, "Don't, it's the morning after Christmas and I'm sleeping late and don't bother me. I don't want to." The worst thing that could happen to us would be to have a false alarm here and create a panic. And that some of these bureaucrats made the conscious decision, just go back to sleep. Don't tell anybody. It's not going to be a tsunami. We know there was an earthquake, but it's not going to cause trouble. Did you hear any of that while you were over there?
I heard all those stories, but I want to counter that, because if people knew what happened on December 17th, they have a different opinion. On December 17th, our government gave our president executive order taking over the world's oceans. On December 17th, I got a document right here to prove that. On December 17th, executive order was signed by our president taking over the world's oceans. And why? Because that happened 9 days before the tsunami hit. Why? They wanted to put monitoring buoys in the water. Why? Because they felt something was getting ready to happen. Why? Because they possibly may have very well knew what was getting ready to happen. That's why. So we as people don't need to always accept what we see or hear on television. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a politician. I'm just a concerned citizen that's asking the question why and a bunch of questions as to what happened.
Okay, I don't think that they knew 8 days ahead of time or 7 days or 9 days ahead of the time of the tsunami that it was going to go on. I think what they were doing was putting together the U.S. Oceans Plan, which was to try to get some technology in there so that if something like this were to happen, they would have a better early warning system. Unfortunately, after the tsunami, they haven't acted fast enough to make sure that the next time it happens, that they do have the early warning system in place. Let me take another break, and We'll talk some more with Eric Williams. The documentary is called Walking Wounded, The Great Tsunami, What Really Happened. It is going to premiere tomorrow at the Ascension Episcopal Church. It's at 4520 Groveland at the corner of Lucas and Hunt, a block south of I-70. And everybody welcome to go to this thing tomorrow, Eric. Is it open to the public?
Oh, it's free and open to the public.
And by the way, he's done this at his own expense. If you'd like to find out more, you can also go to his website, which is otbox.org. And we'll come back and talk some more about his experiences there in the great tsunami of Southeast Asia on the Paul Harris Show. News Talk 1120 KMOX. Eric Williams is a documentary filmmaker who 3 days after the Christmas tsunami felt that he had to go and get on film everything he could about the experience of what had happened to Sri Lanka and Indonesia. And so he spent 3 weeks over there, and he was just telling me during the commercial, during that time, had no shower, had no bath, and really had no place to stay. Where did you stay?
I slept in a truck, SUV.
Wow. A rental?
That was in Indonesia. In Sri Lanka, I actually had a hotel because I was with the relief workers. But when I got to Indonesia, I was solo. Totally.
Let's talk about those relief workers for just a second. They were from California. And how did you just run into these guys and ask to tag along?
Literally, I ran into them at the airport, told them what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and sought to see if they would allow me to trail them as they witnessed the devastation firsthand for the first time.
And you got a lot of their activities in the movie and on film.
Yes.
What did you observe them doing? Was there anything anybody could do?
Well, because it was so early, everybody was in the assessment mode, not so much the relief mode. I mean, everybody was trying to assess what was needed for relief and who needed it. Mm-hmm. So when we got there, like I said, it was so early. They were still pulling bodies from the train wreck. The Sea Queen. So
when he says train wreck, he means literally there was a train that was knocked off the tracks.
Literally, I mean, lifted up and thrown several feet away from the ocean. I mean, this particular train ran alongside the Indian Ocean, and the wave had to be, they said, 50 feet high when it came in and hit this train. and it was loaded with passengers. Over 2,000 people perished in that one spot.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got there 3 days later, they were still pulling bodies from the train. So all of this is on film.
Mm-hmm.
So I really get up close and personal. And in the film, you're only going to see one shot of the wave because we've been bombarded and sensationalized with the wave. Everybody's been has seen the wave, but they haven't seen the personal tragedy and effect that it's had on these people
Right.
then and still today.
So once they were able to assess the situation, the relief workers' mission was what? Rebuild, find people. What was the first priority they had once they figured out how bad it was?
Water and shelter. Water and shelter was the main need at that time because people didn't have homes and they didn't have water, even though water killed majority of the people.
Yep.
So they didn't have the water.
Portable drinking
water. So that was real important that water was sent to the region real quick. So the U.S. military was there providing that. They had the U.S. Abraham Lincoln based off the coast of Indonesia, where they actually had a water purification system on board the U.S. Abraham Lincoln. And they would helicopter the water in, and I got that as relief efforts as well. I mean, tons and tons of water was coming in.
This is a silly question. I mean, we're talking about absolute devastation and a tragedy here. So permit me one silly question here. Did you run out of film? Where do you get film in the middle of a tsunami?
You know, that was my main fear. other than something bad happening to me there, my second worst fear was I would get overwhelmed with what I was seeing and wouldn't know how to turn my camera off and would find myself without tapes. So I stocked up on enough before I left, but when I arrived in Bangkok, I said, well, I might ought to go to the mall right quick and pick up some more. So I did. I picked up some more tape, and all together, collectively, I think I expended about 12 hours worth of tape.
12 hours you shot while you were there over the course of the 3 weeks.
Over the course of 3 weeks.
How much of your own money did you spend on this trip, Eric?
It's cost me roughly $50,000 now.
50 grand.
50 grand.
Do you have a distribution deal? I mean, have you put this DVD out, or is somebody doing it for you?
No, I'm doing everything, and I'm looking for help. I'm looking for relief agencies that are interested in using my film to help them continue the relief efforts. I think it would be a great opportunity. Right now, I'm working with an organization out in Seattle that we're possibly going to sign a deal where they're going to put their name on the film as well, and we're going to re-edit it to help it work for their needs. So I'm interested in doing things like that. I'm interested in booking more dates around the country. Right now I'm on a 12-city tour, but I'm interested in coming back to St. Louis. I'm interested in doing other dates around the country with relief organizations or with whomever has a desire to continue to help maintain the level of awareness for the suffering in Southeast Asia.
That's terrific. Good for you. Now, again, maybe another silly question here, but I'm always interested in process, and these things go through my mind. Do they speak English? Do you speak? What language do they speak in Sri Lanka and Indonesia? Is it Arabic?
Yeah, it was Arabic, and in Sri Lanka they spoke English, and then I forget the other language, but
whatever their native language.
Yeah, whatever their native
language. Which you don't speak.
No.
Okay,
no.
Well, you're there for 3 weeks. You got to be able to ask people questions and find out what's going on. Did you have an interpreter?
I did. I had an interpreter in both countries, in Indonesia and in Sri Lanka, and I mean the language was a barrier, and it was broken responses from the interpreter back to me. They could barely understand me, and I could barely understand them, but we were able to piece together a concise meaning of what we were trying to say to each other.
Tell me about children, because this was part of the story that we didn't see enough of as far as I'm concerned, because with all these people who died, all I could think is, wow, there are going to be a lot of orphans.
80,000 kids died in the tsunami.
80,000 children.
80,000 children.
Wow.
More women and children than men. So you'll see that in the film. I mean, it's a sad situation that so many kids died. You know, and I focus a lot on that in the film. And it was really kind of hard to try to end the film on a happy note. You know, this is not a kind of film where you're going to go and sit and laugh.
And at the end, the lovers kiss and everything walks off in the sunset. You can't have that.
No. So, you know, it was a real daunting task to try to figure out how do you end a film on an upbeat with a serious downbeat situation. But I think I was able to achieve it, and so far people have stated that.
By focusing on the kids.
Precisely.
We take another break. We'll come back with more with Eric Williams. The movie's called Walking Wounded. It'll have its premiere tomorrow at the Ascension Episcopal Church in North City, over by Lucas and Hunt, a block south of Interstate 70. And if you'd like more information, you can go to the website otbox.org. And there's even a 60-second clip of it on there that you can check out. And it's just out on DVD, and hopefully he'll find some distribution for that as well, because there's some riveting stuff here. Eric Williams on the Paul Harris Show. This is News Talk 1120 KMOX.